we've had an enormous amount of interest in this session today, which we're very grateful for, and we are expecting quite a few people. So we're just going to give it a minute or so. You'll see me looking off to the clock in the corner. We'll start in about a minute or so, just to give those people still logging on a chance to do so before I introduce the panelists and kick off. So bear with us as we'll start in about a minute. Thank you. And hello to Fiona, who said good morning already. So a nice shout out. We'll get some admin-y stuff out of the way. You can see, for those of you that are new to this particular platform, you can see there's an Ask the Speaker panel on the right. If you've got any questions for our panelists as we go through the session over the next hour or so, please do drop those in, and we'll do our very best to answer those questions as we go. We'll also be referencing quite a lot of statistics. This is one of those subjects that I think it really pays to sort of rely on some outside expertise as well, hence our guests today. And so there will be a handout at the end of the session that we'll send on when we follow up. Okay, let me start then. It's 10:31. Good morning to everybody, and thank you so much for taking the time out this morning. And good morning to my panelists here this morning. We want to talk over the next hour or so about attracting and retaining talent whilst building a positive culture in our workplaces, and specific to legal practice. And I'm delighted to be joined by Claire, Nadia, and Helen. I'll ask you to introduce yourself in just a tick. Within this panel discussion, I'll invite our expert panelists to discuss a challenge facing us for attracting and retaining talent in what has become an extraordinarily dynamic working environment for just about everyone as we adopt a new way of hybrid working. And we're going to talk about the impact that has on businesses, on legal practices, on individuals, and on the relationship between ourselves as business leaders, as employees and colleagues, and of course the knock-on effect that has across the entire spectrum. So, without further ado, Helen Hay is Head of Talent and Culture for Shakespeare Martineau. Helen, do you want to say hello and introduce yourself briefly?
Yeah, sure. Good morning, everyone. It's lovely to be here. So as Marcus says, I work for Shakespeare Martineau, so we're a full service law firm, and we're part of a group of companies, professional services organisations that spans from law through to sort of personal injury and also cybersecurity. In terms of my role, I'm responsible for making those companies an awesome place to work, whether it's attracting awesome talent, developing amazing talent, and also looking at the different cultures that we have within our differing organisations and dialing those up to the max, which we'll step into a bit more detail later.
Thanks, Helen, and welcome. Nadia Edwards-Dashley is Chief Customer Officer for Harrington Starr. Nadia, would you say a few words and introduce yourself, please?
Thank you, and thank you so much for having me on the session. I'm really excited about today and what we'll be talking about. So yes, my name's Nadia. I'm the Chief Customer Officer and a co-founder of Harrington Starr. So the Harrington Starr Group, we are recruiters, and we place technologists and sales staff into the financial services sector. I say financial services sector. At the moment, everyone's talking about fintech, and that's a huge, huge part of our client base. But we also work with many other companies that are regarded as financial services. I think what makes us unique and why I'm here today is that we put a lot of time and effort into us researching our industry and how people are engaging with their staff, so that staff want to stay there, staff want to progress there. So I can imagine I'll be bringing quite a lot of that research into today's talk. So again, thanks for having me.
Brilliant. Thanks, Nadia. I appreciate that. And last but very much not least, our very own Claire Jameson, talent partner for the Access Group. Hello, Claire.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Yeah, thanks for having me on the session. I'm a colleague of Marcus's. I work at the Access Group as a talent partner. So I've been at Access for about 3.5 years, but overall within the sort of HR arena for the last 20 something years, looking at talent, learning and development, organisational development, diversity and belonging. So very much that part of HR. So hopefully be able to give some insight to the conversation on some of the things that, in my experience, that I've done in other organisations, and certainly some of the things that we're doing at Access.
Brilliant. Welcome, Claire. Welcome, all three of you. Thank you again for taking the time. I talked about the dynamic environment that we find ourselves in post-pandemic. I don't want to avoid the elephant in the room. Everything seems to be about COVID and the pandemic, but certainly when we have a look at some of the information that's come out of secondary research in the market from people such as PricewaterhouseCoopers, Thomson Reuters, Armstrong Watson, we find that larger legal firms are saying that they are expecting 80% of the working life to be in situ, in the office, only 20% hybrid working. And smaller firms are saying actually they're expecting over sort of 50-60% of people's time to be hybrid working, remote working. And that seems to resonate with fee earners in terms of looking for a better work-life balance and coming out of the pandemic, wanting to be more flexible, to work from home more often. And we find this conflict between potentially some of the larger firms' expectations and the employees. And anecdotally, we know that some fee earners are making decisions based solely on work-life balance. So I guess my question then is, with the pandemic forcing law firms and other businesses, we shouldn't dismiss the broader professional services provider. With the pandemic forcing them to adopt a more hybrid, flexible working approach, what would you say? How has this affected or changed the way that you attain or attract and then retain top talent? Your own personal experiences within this dynamic, this conflict. Alan, do you want to kick us off on?
Yeah, sure. So for us as an organisation, we've always felt it to be a really positive thing. So for us, touching on the sort of the stats that you gave there, Marcus, for us as well, we chose from the outset that we didn't want to provide rules because we've spent so long as part of the pandemic, as most of us did, being told what to do. And actually at the time, as we were looking at what does it look like post-COVID and coming back to the office, what does that look for us long term? We didn't know, much like we didn't know how it was going to work through the pandemic. So for us, we have created what we've called empowered working. And for us, we have dialed that up for enabling teams to decide what is best needing for their clients and best needing for that team ethos to thrive and still to develop. That in itself was sort of that starting point, meant that we had to really change how we attracted our talent in making sure that everybody understood what we mean by that. And the fact that there are sort of, some adverts may say it means 3 days in the office. No, it means it's a conversation. And actually the things and the silver linings that we all felt from a work-life balance and a well-being, we truly do mean that in terms of us trusting our people. And that's where we have to have better conversations with individuals as we're onboarding, looking at how we're attracting them through sort of the methods of attraction, whether it's how we're phrasing ourselves, but also rethinking about how we're actually taking those strategies to the marketplace. A lot of the tech and a lot of the services we use weren't fit for hybrid advertisements or how you're actually positioning yourself in the marketplace. And we've had to think quite carefully or how we can actually position those to make sure that that talent is coming through, and us embracing that anybody can live anywhere within the UK to support a regional need or a varying degree of different roles. And just having that passion for wanting to collaborate and be flexible in terms of where they work and also coming together as a team. Beyond that, we've made that happen quite easily. And I think a lot of the time that we spend is around conversations for individuals, for a talent coming in, that they understand it and we truly mean it. And that's only developed through conversation, through anything else.
Perfect, thank you. Nadia, on the other side of that fence though, and when you're out in the market sort of attracting people, how does that conversation evolve in terms of that dynamic and the way that it's changed?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in terms of attracting people, I think I can bring in lots of insights from the financial services community that will be translated straight over. Like Helen has hit the nail on the head, and it's so interesting, the words that she used. It's encourage, collaboration. this is what people want. Whereas on the other side, you've got many companies using, you mentioned it, Helen, rules, enforcing those rules. And that we all know what that makes us feel just listening to this conversation. So when individuals are looking to choose what's their next best career step, the wonderful thing that the pandemic did, if anything wonderful did come out of it, is this focus on the self and actually looking at what is best for me and where can I go that will ultimately allow me to progress in the best way for me. Whereas pre-pandemic, we were all set up for, and as a recruiter, it's a really easy way for me to explain it. We were all set up for job descriptions, fit into that box, tick every single one of those lines that are written there. Can you do it? Can't you do it? Really transactional. And this is, I relate back to what, Helen was saying, the words that she was using. It's about people and their personal growth. So that when someone is looking to leave, they want to make sure they're going to be supported. So I think it's really, really a relevant conversation to be having and looking at taking those individuals on a journey and actually putting yourself into their shoes. And I think that relates on both sides. So it's not just the people applying, it's also the managers that they're applying to. Because I think in these conversations, we often overlook them. And in the financial services community, we've got the archetypal CEO who wants everyone back in 5 days a week. That's definitely not all of them. But there are some, and I'm sure there's some in legal, who feel safer that way. And I know we're going to go into that in a bit more detail, but it's a really good opener. And I just wanted to highlight those two differences, the difference between enforcing and the difference between choice and collaboration.
Thanks, Nadia. I appreciate that. And that's really good insight from that attraction perspective. But Claire, how has it changed in terms of the retention side? So where we've got a workforce that perhaps, to Nadia's point, were absolutely used to the sort of edict from the top saying, "Oh, you'll be in the office 5 days a week and you work 9 to 5 and do that." And then all of a sudden, within the space of, and I'm not exaggerating, literal days, moving from to a fully remote environment, and then that transition back to that hybrid situation. From an access perspective, from your perspective, how was that managed, and what were the pitfalls?
Yeah, I think, it's incredibly interesting. And I agree totally with Nadia and Helen, your words there around encouraging collaboration and all of that piece. And over that span, I think some of the conversations that I've heard and observed have gone from, well, we were always telling you we could work from home, not necessarily the access group, but people in general just saying, we always sort of said we probably could work from home. Then we had to, and proved in the main that actually was really successful, if not more successful. And then there's that making that transition back into the workplace, and people started to actually, I think, really say, this actually is the harmony that I would prefer to have in life, having that ability to be able to work from home and work from the office. And I think sometimes some of the conversations I have now with just friends and people outside of work is that they miss the office more than anything. As much as people have appreciated having that ability to have, as I say, more harmony in their work life, they miss people a lot and miss the office quite a lot. And almost it started to get to a point as we're coming out of the pandemic that the office was a bad place to be. It was the place where you don't want to go there anymore. That's where they keep an eye on you and don't give you that flexibility. And there was some bits in the press about sort of real negativity towards actually going back into the office. And actually, I think having that balance is really what a lot of people are looking for, that ability to have still those relationships with people, that social contact, and the whole well-beingness of that, of being able to be together with people that's what you enjoy. That's part of the way that organisations have their culture, through the people that we have. So I think it would be nice to start to hear the narrative around being in the office being flipped more to actually the reason to be in the office is to have that social interaction, that element of fun, again, that camaraderie, and actually just for your well-being and to enable you to have all the support that you need to be able to help you thrive and help your customers thrive. So I think that's where I would like to see us getting to more of a conversation around why it's nice to have both elements and have that possible.
if I just take a pause and sort of summarize that, what we're talking about here is about better communication, better flexibility, and more of a balanced approach in terms of being able to encourage the best out of the people that we work alongside. Is that a fair summation so far? And if we were just to talk about the impact of COVID, that might be it, just in terms of, be more human, be kinder, and be more understanding. But again, from a study recently published this year, in terms of the impact now that the economic uncertainty is bringing, I see that permacrisis is now being added to the Collins Dictionary, because we seem to be, as a country, as a society, pinballing from sort of one crisis to another. And of course, when we talk about inflation and the concerns that brings, cost of living, certainly from an Armstrong-Watson report, I saw that things like telecommuting is being used as a real motivator to cut down on some of those personal expenses. So how important, given that framework, how important is offering flexible working options now in the job market? What are candidates asking for specifically today that they weren't before? How do we fit those into that conversation early on? Helen, you look like you're about to say something.
I think it's vitally important, and I think if an organisation's not, then they're going to be left behind. I think the world has changed in terms of how we work post-COVID, and whilst there's degrees of different days and different offices, every business cannot be under any illusion, unless their role is a manual role that has to be a customer-facing role. You cannot not consider how that works for you as your business. You will miss out on such amazing talent, and also not broaden the horizon of where that talent pool is. It doesn't need to be local anymore. It can be anywhere that you need it to be across the UK. That enables you to be making sure that you're selecting the best talent that fits your culture. And also it is a likewise conversation, but you get that better opportunity rather than just focusing on it. People, I think, expect it to some degree, and not to be able to provide it is going to really damage brand and culture, in my view.
No, that's interesting. You talk about that sort of that delimiting of geography in terms of being able to cast the net wider in terms of attracting, and in terms of those living outside big cities, and so we think about London Waiting, for example, and the salaries that go alongside London Waiting now being offered to people that potentially, and I'll craft a synthetic sort of circumstance about somebody living perhaps in Exeter, being able to telecommute to a London firm. Nadia, have you seen that? Have you seen that shift? Is it as seismic as we think it might be?
Oh, especially for technology roles, because there's so much that can be done remotely. And I think that shift is happening. But also what is really relevant in this conversation is, we talk about choice, communication and kindness, and kind of takes me back to that old adage of don't take kindness for weakness. I was recently doing a training session on different personalities, like, personalities that you'll have in your team, in your family, in your life. And then I was showing the person I was talking to what happens to those personalities under stress. So, we're about to hit a more stressful economic situation. We know that we're going downhill on this. And, as people who employ people, we need to look after those people. That kindness isn't weak. And I think that when we look at how we offer flexible options, hybrid options, that kindness is actually to ensure that people are engaged in the job that they're doing with us, feel secure so they can focus on the job that they're doing. And actually, I always go back to becoming the best that they want to be within the workplace. And for many years, we've had problems where we've held people back and they've decided to leave their businesses because they can't progress. They can't focus on the job they're doing because the system and the environment and the culture is not set up for them. So when we look at how important flexible working is, it's just one of many things that we have kind of created as the future of work, so that these environments are more equitable for more people, so that they can be better performers within our business and ultimately more happier performers within our businesses. So for me, from a recruitment point of view, I'm constantly talking to companies of 10,000 people to companies of 10 people about these things. And and ensuring that that kindness isn't seen as weakness, but that kindness is actually a strength, and a strength around people, and a strength for your business, because it means you can reach out to people even beyond the UK and really, really choose the best skill set and the best potential for your business.
I love kindness, not weakness. I think that's absolutely true. Claire, let's have a look at this from the other side now, in terms of this has been very much from the individual's perspective, as we talked about balance a little earlier, but from a company perspective, regardless of its size. And Nadia, I love it's the same problem between 10 or 10,000. But Claire, what challenges does this face now? We had to make such a step change a couple of years ago, but what are the challenges that we're facing today, and how do we overcome those, do you think, from your experience?
And I think almost to flip the conversation, I know it's much challenges but opportunities. To Helen and Nadia's point, I mean, we've seen certainly just in Access, not just been able to broaden the net for the UK, but actually globally. We can have people that are employed wherever they are in the world, that enable us to get the best talent for our organisation. So I think there are opportunities that come with this, and some of the challenges that I think that are there are more around that support that Nadia's talking about, and thinking about the well-being, and can be quite isolating actually if you are just working from home in your little box office, and not having that interaction with people. Lots of people will absolutely love that, will want to be kind of much more introverted and not get their energy from other people, and really love that ability to be able to work that way and give them that flexibility. But I think one of the things that we need to think about as a duty of care is, how do we stay connected? How are we ensuring that people are having those opportunities to stay in touch? And I think at least, once a week as leaders, we should be having conversations with our teams, even if it's just a 15-minute check-in that says, how are you doing? How are you feeling? And I'm sure many people were doing that, certainly throughout the pandemic, around making sure that their teams were feeling connected still, and able to continue to do and thrive as they were when we were all together, when they're now kind of in an environment that could actually be quite difficult circumstances to work under. I think, again, you kind of see things from your own perspective. And if you've got an office space at home, or you've got a quiet space at home, that's great. But lots of people didn't. Lots of people were working off their kitchen tables, and perhaps in house shares with numerous different people who are doing the same thing. And that's not easy at all. And that can really affect people's mental health. And that, I think, has been probably one of the challenges that businesses we needed to stay connected to. But I think many, many opportunities that have come out of it.
Thank you. Nadia, it's interesting. I know we've spoken about this before, but you came out with a great quote about the environment that people work in, and interesting listening to Claire there talk about the impact it has on the individual. Do you want to share that quote? You know the one I'm talking about?
Yes. So it's a Danish speaker, a very famous Danish speaker called Alex van Høyer, and I'll read out the quote so I get it exactly right, because I love it. If a flower doesn't bloom, you change the environment in which it grows, not the flower. And I love this concept because for many years we've looked at staff and said, oh, I don't know what's wrong with them, or what's their problem why they haven't done this, when actually, let's flip the switch. What do we need to do to make our environments better? So I constantly talk to people across fintech and financial services about what can we do to make your environments more equitable, to be truly inclusive? Because right now, the biggest thing that people are talking about, apart from hybrid working, is how do we bring more diversity of thought into the financial services sector? And realistically, it's not about just bringing them in. It's about making sure that people feel that they are included and can be progressed within businesses and have the fair opportunities that they should do. So that quote to me just opens up our whole, like, Aladdin's cave of conversation, because the minute that you stop pointing fingers and pulling thumbs to yourself and your organization and your industry, and you say, right, what can we do to make this better? I think it just opens up so many, in the word again, opportunities for us to really invest in our staff and encourage them to want to stay, to want to progress, to want to be really successful under our roofs, whether they're virtual or not.
And I love that quote, and I know we've spoken about it before, but it really highlights, and the reason I brought that in, Claire, was because of a comment that you made a little earlier about, you know, opportunities to stay in touch and the isolation of having to work in a box room or a bedroom. You know, not everybody has the opportunity to, you know, to sort of turn half the house over to a mobile office. So when we talk about challenges that we're facing, that ongoing challenge of this new way of working, do you see it changing? Do you see it going back to the good old days, or moving on to a new way of working? Is this just a stepping stone to something else?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think this is, unless, like Helen said, unless there is an absolute reason why you cannot offer a flexible working environment, then it absolutely has to be the future, and something that lots of organisations, again, have been talking about, but for a long time prior to the pandemic. I think this just really helped accelerate that conversation. So I don't see it really as certainly the world of office work going back to being a 100% in the office, but I think that ability to have that flexibility, that hybrid approach, and like I say, just changing the conversation about what the office is there for. It's not the big bad office. It is there to enable that support, to enable you to thrive. It gives you those great opportunities. So I think that's where the conversation just needs to flip a little bit as we move on. Actually having the opportunity to work in the office is just as great as previously we used to say, and you've got the opportunity to work from home, Costa, wherever it is that you want to work. Actually bringing that back as a positive part of your working life is a really important step, I think, as we move forward.
And I love that flip, and it's always nice to sort of flip that over in terms of, you know, whereas working at home used to be seen as a benefit, or you know, the ability to work at home, now it's turned over, and now it's actually, you know, actually come into the office. We've got a vibrant culture, and we're talking about talent, attraction, retention, and culture, and so getting to that. Helen, I know that Shakespeare Martineau has been over quite a journey over the last couple of years in the way that you've driven that approach to culture. What initiatives can you call on? What's that journey been like for you, given in mind what Claire's just said about sort of flipping that over to?
Exactly, and I think to touch on what Nadia and Claire were saying, so Nadia was referring in terms of the flower and sort of the environment it grows in. You cannot expect people to still thrive in an environment that was pre-pandemic. So taking that and building on sort of that awesome quote that I absolutely adore, has been that you need to give attention to the culture within sort of that hybrid environment. So for us, that was around wellbeing conversations. You see people on a screen. What you see after that screen, you don't. It could be somebody that is not well, that may be going through some tough challenges, that doesn't have that opportunity to necessarily express that in a way that they would have done when you're just observing somebody in an office environment. And for us, that was something very early on in terms of key initiatives, in terms of making sure that how do we give that attention to communication? There were some great cascades in terms of how we actually set that up in when we needed to through a lockdown environment that we have maintained. We have to constantly work in terms of how that fits, whether that's through our seasons. In summer, a less is more as approach, because in terms of, you know, whether it's seasonal, we're busy human beings and we're out and about doing different things. Whereas when it comes to a winter, we give more dedication to that in the fact of how we're feeling and how we work in a team, and also how we're working. So that leads on to another thing that we've done, which is where we've done a hibernation to hybrid working, where we have worked with our teams to understand the different challenges that each individuals face, and opening up that conversation where somebody may be going to work because they may live alone. It may be a social interaction versus somebody that may be in the same team saying, it's actually a hindrance for me to want to come into an office because I get more work done at home. But actually, when we've opened up conversation, it's been really powerful for individuals to say, well, actually, I do more at home, but actually to come in and spend time with other individuals in that social environment has really embedded our empowered working ethos, and the teams to sort of agree between themselves in terms of those days. other things that we have done is in terms of our well-being is being really transparent in terms of the conversation. I think when it comes to culture, never pretend you've got everything perfect, because it never is. It's not a reality that exists. And I think it then doesn't necessarily breed true trust, which is the bedrock of engagement within an organization. And for us, talking about some of those challenges that you're facing as an organization and opening up that conversation is immensely powerful, because again, through the power of people talking about it leads to ideas and innovation. Whether it's one of the initiatives we introduced as a result of that is a thing that we call collab roulette, where individuals meet other individuals and network across our hybrid platforms, rather than having to be reliant of being in an office. And again, builds those connections and builds how we work together in that hybrid environment. And then lastly, I think in terms of sort of being in an office space, it's making it a place that you want to be. People want to come together because they miss people, as we said before. So let's dial that up. What can we do in terms of whether it's breaking bread for team lunches or having time spent together to get to know each other? Lots of people have joined organizations in the last 3 years that have never met people. How do we go and give that attention to enable to build those true relationships and also spend that time with each other? And I could go on forever in terms of a long list, which we'll probably come back to some of them later.
I expect so. I love some of the phraseology. Some of the phrases you use, Helen, are brilliant. Hibernation, hybrid working, I think might be my my new favorite phrase of all time, and collaboration roulette. But one of the things you mentioned just now was about trust. And again, when we look at some of the, I'm not going to quote sources on this one, but when we look at some of the more salacious news headlines of recent years, when we talk about X% of bosses believe that people are at home watching Judge Judy or whatever, rather than doing the work. How do we get around that trust conversation? That, if you're not in the office at 8:45, ready to start work at 9 o'clock, and so on. And again, I realize I'm harking back to sort of pre-pandemic mindsets, but it's still being discussed, and I just want to challenge that, and I'll throw that open to anyone that wants to sort of jump in on that one.
I'd love to say a couple of words to open that up. Sorry, Claire, I saw your lips starting to move as well. I'll be quick. So, when you asked that question, it made my mind go back to like the March, April, when we went into lockdown. And do you remember everyone was talking about productivity versus presenteeism? Like that was the first thing that really started to come out, apart from obviously the panic of how do we get everyone working from home. And I think that it still smacks of that. As people are becoming more stressed about the economic crisis, they're thinking, I need to see everybody. I need to know that they're working. And we've sort of regressed. We're regressing in financial services for sure on flexible hours, when people come into the office, how people report in, the amount of reviews that people are doing. It's becoming oppressive. And I think that trust is such an important word, because here at Harrington Starr, we've just started putting together our final magazine of the year. We produce 3 a year, and in the final one, we do our top 1% workplace awards. So I've basically interviewed 100 companies on what makes their company a great place to work. And I've then written a piece about it, and I've called that trust, because the companies that are winning this game are the ones that are saying, we trust you. Of course, we're going to help you stretch and get better. Of course, we will do reviews to make sure that we are doing our due diligence in supporting you, but we're going to do it in a way where we're not being oppressive. And I think that's a really important word to be using here alongside trust, because that really is the other option. Trust requires some scaffolding. It requires some support, because actually they've got to trust the employee that they're in safe hands and they're improving here. And there's a number of parts that are involved in that. But this oppression starting to creep back in, I think, is incredibly negative, and we'll just have people leaving their jobs. So yeah, sorry, I wanted to say that quickly because I felt quite passionate about it.
Of course, that's fine, and that's why we're here, right? Absolutely want to celebrate your passion. Somebody else was going to jump in though, and I didn't see who it was. Was it
Sorry.
Claire?
Yeah, I was just going to say the bit that, because it reminds me of a phrase that somebody said to me years and years and years ago, was around if you don't trust your employee to work from home, to work where you cannot see them, then you really have to look in the mirror yourself. You made a bad hire then, surely, if you cannot trust that individual to work without you being under your gaze. And that's a phrase that's always stuck with me, or thought process always stuck with me. And Nadia put it in much more positive terms with the way you said there, but you have to ask yourself, what is it that's made me distrust that person that's always been a great employee, who's always delivered when they've been sat where I am? Why is it that I wouldn't trust them to continue to deliver that when they're not? It doesn't really make sense. So I just wanted to share that phrase.
No, that's perfect. Helen, surely the answer is lots and lots of personal development reviews and one-to-ones and check-in clinics, and I have set you up for that, I know.
You have, because you know my strong opinions on that. No, so and I think it's not at all, and I think that's one of the things. Late 2020, we took out appraisals. So I think when it comes to hybrid working, how the business has changed, how we actually operate on a trust-based system, then you need to look at every facet of your business. It's not the role of a people team or a talent or engagement team. It is the role of everybody within the business that holds that responsibility to look at everything that focuses on output rather than the input. To be able to have trust and control, you don't need control. It's leading with trust. And we felt that appraisals were an element of control that doesn't make productivity, it doesn't boost it. It doesn't make morale any better. If anything, it negates it. It takes it back. It doesn't celebrate people or achievements. And we focused on simple conversations that already happen, and take away a formal framework that both line manager and people are scared of. That again, it creates that false relationship that it doesn't make business better. It doesn't foster trust. That actually by continuing check-in conversations and actually taking performance ratings off the table, everybody is exceptional. We have high standards. We work to them. Let's move on. Let's focus on what our blockers are. Let's focus on how I as a leader can help you to unblock those and make us produce a project, a piece of work, or dazzle a client with some work in a way that is going to make our business better. And we all feel really proud of what we've delivered. And I think that is immensely important. And I think to go back to trust, I think I would encourage everybody to look at where that is going to be able to be dialed up, but also the mechanisms you take out that have that control, whether you think it's control or sort of those things that imply that it is, because that does so much more damage.
Pretty good. And I'm going to call in a couple of questions because I think we might have hit a nerve here, in a good way, in a very positive way. And there are a couple of things that I want to call in, specifically, Helen, on you, which is the question that's come in about how we effectively then supervise junior staff. So where we talk about trust, and Claire, you were using the example of somebody that has a history of repeatedly delivering, and we should sort of treat them with that level of trust. But I'll start with you, Helen, just because of your model of removing appraisal. How do we encourage, how do we support, how do we develop junior staff? And again, I'm playing devil's advocate to a degree, but I really want to hear your opinion.
Well, I think it's an element of just looking at what are the outputs that are coming from that individual. I think as a line manager, you need to Claire's point, make sure, have you got a great hire there? Because they need to be invested in terms of the role that they're doing. Always lead from a positive. I think too often in business, people focus on a 2% or a 1% that aren't engaged, that aren't going to deliver and aren't working, when the majority are. Actually spend time to get to know them, understand what is making them tick, have that regular conversation and check in with them, and look at the outputs that are produced. If it means that individuals are able to be more flexible with their diary to go focus on a hobby or pick their kids up from school for the first time in their career, but you're getting more output than you have ever seen from a 9 to 5, and somebody sending you emails every day and reports on what they're doing, then surely that's an amazing thing. It's scary, and I really recognise that we did have that as a business in terms of we're letting the reins go. the best way to do that is demonstrating the silver linings in terms of the wins of what are you seeing, what are you observing, what are you seeing in terms of outputs, builds that confidence level within leadership in it being the right thing. And it absolutely flows through from a financial and a retention return. Be brave.
Be brave.
Be brave.
Perfect. I'm going to ask you all for a couple of takeaways at the very end. You'll have to come up with another one, Helen. Claire, how does that sit with you, though? And Nadia, I'll come to you afterwards.
I totally agree with what Helen's saying there, that it is, it does come back to that element of trust. You do have to trust people, but it's putting the mechanisms in place so that those people do feel supported. And actually, again, coming back to harp on about it, but actually coming to the office isn't a bad thing. If that's what's needed to be able to support that person early in their career, to have the network around them that can help them nurture and grow, that's perfectly okay, because that's warranted for the job. And if I take example of our apprentices, for example, we've got a number of apprentices in the organisation now, and actually the right thing to do, they're really early in their career, is to say that you need to be coming and be in our office where we've got that support network around you that can deliver all of the training and the development that you need to be able to be in a position to be able to be competent in the role that we want you to be able to deliver, so that you're great for yourself, you're great for our customers. That's okay to say that, and enable people to get to that point that they've got everything that they need, that you can then maybe make those flexible arrangements. And like Helen says, it's just about having transparent conversations and being open and looking absolutely at output rather than are they in front of me all the time, and how does that work? So I completely agree with Helen's point.
Lovely, thank you. Nadia, do you want to weigh in? I have a very specific question for you in a second.
Go on, ask me the specific question.
No, it's for everyone, but again, we're talking about balance, we're talking about communication, we're talking about flexibility. How do you manage? And this, again, we've picked up on this theme a couple of times. Claire, you've mentioned it, Helen and Nadia, I know too. But so we're automatically leaning towards the negative. And Helen, your advice is, sort of catch people in, not catch people out. Lead from the positive. Love that. So what about those people that blur the boundaries between their work and their home life? The people that we don't have to worry about trusting them because they always deliver, but we discover they're putting in 18-hour days, 6 days a week, which they wouldn't normally have had the chance to do within that office environment. So how do we deal with the people that are doing too much? That one's for you, Nadia.
Okay, sorry, I wasn't sure whether the other ladies wanted to answer that. I'm so pleased that you've asked that question, because I bet you everybody on this right now listening, their minds go straight to, when people aren't doing enough. And actually, like, the responsibility of engaging staff and the duty of care and looking after them and investing in them is the other side as well. When they're doing too much that's not getting viewed, that's not getting recognised, and too much that's leading them into burnout. Because when we look at all the different personality types that are out there, my personality type pre-babies would have been working until midnight, because that was almost like my validation of, I'm definitely doing, is that a good job? Am I doing a good job? Which is probably my own personal anxiety issues. But, I know I'm not alone on this. There are people out there that need that support, and that, as Helen was saying, the ad hoc reviews of checking in. And I know, Claire, you've mentioned some of them that are similar to really allow people to understand, what does good look like? So we have worked really hard on answering that question per person. What does good look like in your role, and what you're supposed to be achieving? What does it look like in a week? What does it look like in a day? What does it look like in a month? Because if someone is unable to really understand what that is, burnout is inevitable in one personality type. And on the other hand, it's also just switching off and saying, well, I'm not capable. I don't know what I need to do here. And I think it's a really, really important one for everyone dialed into this, to actually look at the people around them, and rather than think, are you doing enough, and do I trust you to do enough? What are you doing that's probably too much, that's probably not your job, that's probably not getting recognised, where I'm overlooking you, and actually you probably deserve a promotion, So it's really multifaceted, this whole conversation.
Appreciate that, absolutely. Helen, have you come across this?
have, and I think this is where it comes back to having those honest conversations and leadership being role models in their boundaries. So we, as our part of our cultures, we want individuals to really showcase their whole selves, and learning from different skills and different interests that everybody has. It makes collaboratively not only opportunities to innovate, but also interest groups that we can form, that individuals can have a better sort of work experience outside of the job they do. But through doing that, you can showcase and bring to life, like our CEO, she's a CEO of an organization, she's also a playwright, she's also a singer. Everybody knows through our organization the different roles and the different hats we all lead, whether it's I'm a mother to two, I have pets, or these are the hobbies, that you're not just that person that's working till midnight every night. It's actually, I'm off to go and do this now. And
Right.
the thing that has really helped us is we have an open diary system. It takes time and it takes attention in terms of making that work, and you have to be strict in your own boundaries of managing your diary, but it enables people to see there's more to you. And also you're being strict with your own boundaries of when you will be available to work. And that has been sort of a secret to probably making that work and embedding it as our organization.
Do as I do, effectively setting those. So Claire, how do we go about setting those boundaries? What are those on limits, off limits? Does it come from the top? Is it how does that manifest itself? How do we manage that?
I was just going to say exactly that, to Helen's point. It's role modelling, and I think it is role modelling from the top, so that people see others demonstrating that behaviour and saying, you know what, I'm not available now because I'm doing the school run, or I'm not available now because actually that's the time that I really like to go to the gym, or whatever it is. It doesn't have to. A lot of things get associated with being parents, and it's not always about that. But this is about people saying, this is the time that I protect, and there's a reason for me protecting that time of mine to have that. And I don't like the work-life balance, but the work-life harmony as much as you can phrase. So I absolutely see that role modelling for top, and I would have been exactly those people in the past where I've not really necessarily myself recognised where those boundaries are and gone too much and doing too much. And it's actually when you feel comfortable and secure in that the people that are leading your organisation say to you, don't do that, I'm not doing that, don't you do that, that you actually go, okay, that's all right then for me. So it really does have to be role modelling and coming from the top. Yeah, for sure.
I love that, and I love the fact that those guidelines should apply across the entire business, in the entire practice, and that it's not one for one and one for another, and so on. It's honest conversation, and honest role modelling, and catching people in and celebrating that. We've answered a couple of questions from the chat, and Nadia, I know you've put the name of the Danish author in that you quoted on the flyer, so I appreciate that. What I want to get back to, if I can, and again, there are a couple of questions that have come in around how mainstream firms, perhaps smaller firms, can compete then with the larger consultancy model firms, the larger firms in the marketplace. And it comes back to a question that I wanted to ask anyway. As we go through culture, as we go through hybrid working, and we've talked about trust. If I'm playing devil's advocate, is it not just about paying more money? Is it not just about being more aggressive in our recruitment strategy? Everyone shook their head. That's brilliant to see, but I'm going to need some detail.
Okay, I can definitely give details, and I've got some stats for you all as well, just to kick this off. So I'm a passionate believer that pay papers over cracks. Like, I'm passionately in belief of this. So obviously being a recruiter of a recruitment agency, we place probably 100 candidates a month. We're speaking to thousands of candidates all the time. So yes, this is financial technology that I'm talking about, but it really does relate over. We did a survey recently. It was only about 6 weeks ago. Just over 8,000 people responded. And we said, apart from pay, what is important to you? And we asked loads of questions around that. And look, pay obviously is important, but we are seeing in the financial technology space, tenure reducing, churn increasing, because from the last year, the last 18 months, the strategy has been just pay. So it's basically encourage people to believe that to progress, they need to leave, right? Which is devastating for any industry, right? And I think we all must take responsibility of this, every single person in every single company. So let me just share some of the stats, right? 67% of the respondents to our survey said that one thing which would have made them stay in their business is if their voice was heard. So small companies can really go to town on that and really support people in terms of their feedback and their direction of the business. Only 18% of the respondents to our survey said that they were totally clear on what they needed to do to progress in their current firm. Like that is a huge opportunity for us all to really increase on. Just a bit of intel of the industry, 69% of them said that they're headhunted at least 1 to 3 times a week on average in the last 12 weeks. We asked them to count it up. So, I mean, it's rife, this sort of fight for talent at the minute. When people do decide to leave, 30% of them are receiving 3+ offers. So we know that things are aggressive. People are just, running to pay, but there's so much more that we can do. 58% simply wanted greater input on decisions. And 52% didn't think career development plans were aligned to their specific needs. So I kind of feel like my stats are responding straight to what Claire and Helen have been saying the whole way through. Like, we've got to communicate, we've got to listen, we've got to build environments where people feel safe to talk and safe to ask. And actually, what's really stood with me over all of this is seeing the office as a benefit, just like we used to see working as home as a benefit. Like, how can we really build this around people so that they can become their best? And I think, that's something that I am so passionate about being a part of in my industry. And I'm just hearing from Helen and Claire, I know that they are within yours. So I hope that's been helpful.
Yeah, supremely helpful. Thank you. How do we communicate that to potential candidates that are interested in working for us when we have a vacancy, or indeed to stop people from sort of taking that "can you talk" phone call that comes in occasionally, or not occasionally, 3 times a week apparently, where people are getting. Helen, how do we get that out to our teams?
I think that's where I think it needs to be truly lived, in the fact of how it feels as a culture working within an organisation. We've spent a lot of time for our team leaders to understand that it's their responsibility. Culture lives in teams of 7 statistically. So within a culture of an organisation, you'll have hundreds of thousands of different cultures. And again, it's not about control, it's about understanding those and understanding the needs of the people. And I think it goes to sort of Nadia's research that she has done. We do that internally. So we ask those questions of our people. Do not profess to have all the answers. Use your people to be able to suggest and provide insight, and you act on it. By doing so, people feel invested, that they are providing a solution, they are providing something to make the business better, and they are proud of that. Taking that control away and enabling that, and people not being precious, it does the work for you, because you have advocates of individuals screaming and shouting, whether it's over LinkedIn or other different social media streams, of "I've done this. I am so proud of what I've achieved with my team and my business," that from an employer brand is something that you cannot pay. It's something that you cannot buy. It's really clear if it's authentic or inauthentic. And that's where you can't overly plan these things. It's working with the inside out, would be my view.
And I love that from this as well. I'm going to write down everything. I'm going to go back and review the recording of this, just because there's so much in there. Claire, let me move on to you, because again, I know this is something from personal experience. I know this is something that is absolutely intrinsic in the Access DNA, in terms of having voice heard, in terms of that emotional investment, in terms of that buying process that Helen's just talked about. Can you give me a couple of examples of where that's worked particularly well?
Yeah, so we have our continuous pulse check within Access. So once a month, every employee gets the opportunity to feed in how they're feeling, how they're engaging with the organisation, and the opportunity then for all the leaders within the organisation to look at that and hear it and act on that particular piece of feedback. So and there's probably hundreds of examples over the years that system has been in place, where we've heard the voice of people saying, this needs to change for us. This is different, from tiny little things to the the way the coffee machines worked, to really big things that really matter to people, actually taking on board all of that feedback and saying, this is what will make life better. Absolutely right. You have to act on it. You have to listen to that and act on it. So if you're not already seeking that feedback from your employees, then that would absolutely be the biggest advice that I could give, is continue to talk to your people, hear what they're saying, listen to what they're saying, and then act on that. And if you can't, if there's something that people are saying, we want this, and actually that's not something you can do, at least acknowledging that and understanding why that perception is there and why somebody might feel like that, acknowledging it and saying, this is what we can do. And if we can't make that bit different, actually then it's still about, I've been listened to, I've been heard, my voice matters.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. I can't believe that we've only got 5 minutes left of this session. I could talk about this with you for another hour, but unfortunately we are coming to the close. I've been scribbling notes all the way through. This has been a phenomenal session for me personally, and I genuinely hope that it's been useful to those that have taken the time to join through Access All Areas. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to just to summarize from my perspective, but can I ask each of you in turn just to give us a couple of takeaways when we talk about culture, talent, attraction, and retention. We've talked about communication, we've talked about flexibility, and we've talked about balance. And I think we've talked about that all the way through, even though those words came out fairly early on in the conversation. I think that's woven through everything that we've spoken about, whether that be employees having their voice heard, whether that be in terms of the trust and the boundaries that are set to enable the right people to develop as we take the next step in, I don't know what to call it, the post-hybrid working area. I'm sure we'll come up with a name for it. But communication and kindness have come up an enormous number of times. Progress, not perfection. We know that's key to what we're doing. I'm going to have to mention the hibernation, hybrid working. I'm taking it out of context, but I think it's been my favorite phrase so far of the last hour. Just in the last few minutes, Claire, could you give me your top 2 tips for attracting and retaining talent and the role that culture plays in that?
Yeah, so a couple of things then from me would be, and firstly, just we haven't really touched on this, but just something that we're actually looking at ourselves right now is just paying attention to some of the art and the science behind role profiles, job descriptions, how they're worded in order to be able to attract the broadest range of talent possible. We've talked about now having this opportunity with hybrid working of being able to appeal to people that aren't in the geographical location of where you're based anymore, and actually being able to appeal to the broadest range of talent that's out there is as we heard from Nadia, the war for talent absolutely still exists, if not more so than ever before. So paying attention to things like that, we're just really reviewing all of the language and the way that we position our role profiles and our shop window, what that looks like, and wanting to attract people. So that would be something that I would say think about. And there's lots of free tools out there actually can really help you with that. And then in terms of attracting talent, and then in terms of retaining talent, it's just to sort of pull out the thread that we're already talking about there. It's listening to people. It's not assuming what you think people want, which is often assuming they just want more money, and that's not necessarily the case. But listening and hearing and taking that feedback on board about what it is that will make people stay with you. Use any points of data that you can to help you with that, whether it's employee opinion surveys, exit interview surveys, but get the data that's telling you this is why people are staying or this is why people are leaving, so that you can do something about that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Nadia.
Cool, we could go on for ages, couldn't we? There was something that I just wanted to mention that Helen said about not catching people out, but catching them in. And that is a phrase that I use a lot when I go and meet hiring managers when they're interviewing people. And I say, look, this is old style panel interviews. That's just not the best way of showcasing the best of your business and the opportunity that you have on offer here for somebody. You're trying to catch them out, you're not trying to catch them in. And that kind of takes me to exactly what I wanted to say on this, which is talent to me now is an experience. We never used to talk about it being an experience before, and thinking about the individual and how they're feeling about joining your business, being part of your business, and progressing within your business. And if you think of it as an experience, I think you change your whole viewpoint on it and the way that you look after people.
Nadia, I really appreciate that. Helen, last word to you.
Yeah, very quickly, I think from my perspective, culture is not just when things are rosy. Culture is important no matter what, and it's more important in times of a pandemic, in times of a cost of living crisis. Keep that front of mind, and to be successful at that, be honest. Be really clear on what you're communicating, whether it's the challenges you're facing as a business. The more you can preempt that with your people, the more you will retain and attract awesome talent. And lead with trust would be my key takeaway, with one final. Be brave.
Perfect. Thank you, Claire, Nadia, Helen. I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed the last hour. Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone who's joined. Yeah, thank you very much. Best of luck. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye. Bye.